Welcome back to the Restaurant Technology Guys podcast. I thank our audience out there for joining us, as I say every time when we get on the air. I know that you guys have got lots of choices, so I appreciate you guys coming and hanging out with us. Today is one of my favorite type of episodes because we get to talk to a restaurateur. Today we are joined by Scott. I'm going to let Scott introduce himself here. Scott, tell us a little bit about who Scott is, and then we can talk a little bit about what you get to do day in and day out.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, so Scott Moffett, President and Chief Operating Officer of Sunny Street Cafe, based here in beautiful Columbus, Ohio, on one of the rare sunny days that we enjoy here. I'm a restaurant and food guy. I've been doing this pretty much all of my working life. My story is pretty simple. I started out, working in restaurants as a waiter and a bartender when I was in college, and then later through graduate school. And I was actually tending bar at Dalt's, which was a spinoff concept from TGI Fridays right there in your hometown of Dallas, Texas. And I was talking to a gentleman by the name of Tom Slaughter, who was the recruiter for Fridays. And I was sort of lamenting the fact that, I had spent a lot of time in college preparing for a career that wasn't feeling right for me anymore. And, Tom, kind of sat back and thoughtfully said, well, Scott, have you ever thought about the restaurant business as a career? And I said, by Jove, I have not. And he said, well, you ought to. Kind of facetious, but seriously, he helped me, sort of change my perspective a little bit. And I went back and I rewrote my resume, such as it was, to reflect more of my restaurant experience versus my scholastic experience. And I was fortunate enough to be hired for my first salaried restaurant job there in Dallas with El Chico, which is your local Tex-Mex casual
Love
chain.
that place.
Yeah, and then just loved it, just stayed in that, and have just been in the industry, since then to current. I think, for all intents and purposes, I have touched every portion of our business, whether training or operations, real estate, construction, certainly franchise sales, franchise development, and now in the president and CEO role, which is sort of a hat that covers all of those types of responsibilities. So I'm a restaurant guy.
I love that. And I would, I'm going to ask a secondary question because I was just talking to a colleague who's been with our company for a little over a year. Just this week, I was at a trade show with him. And one of the things he started to recognize is how many people have followed a similar career path to you. Why do you think that is, Scott? Because and I think it's interesting, and I think as we talk a little bit more about what you get to do with Sunny Street, I think it'll be an interesting continued conversation because I think that's part of the path that you guys have taken. But there's so many people that started as a bartender, as a server, as a busboy, as a dish person, and make their way up and recognize how much they love this industry and how much they love to be around the people and such.
Yeah, a couple of things. And looking back on it, I think the restaurant industry was the first equal opportunity employer. Right there wasn't anything that held you back in the industry other than your ability to perform and produce results. Mm-hmm. So there were a tremendous opportunity. If you were motivated and you were excited and you were able to get the job, and particularly on the operations side of the business, then there was nothing to hold you back. For me, one of the things that was most compelling was just the dynamic environment. I mean, it's different every day.
Yes.
It's a new challenge every day. It's a very social opportunity. You've got to love to be around people and work with people. You've got to be, I guess, quick on your feet. You got to be a little bit of a risk taker. You got to be active. You got to like to be up and around. And, as I moved through my career and moved more out of the restaurants into the corporate office, the hardest transition was to get used to, doing what I'm doing today, which is, sitting by a desk and looking at a computer versus, being in the restaurants. And you still got to do that. I've got to get out a couple of times a week and just be in the stores and talk to the employees. And most importantly, talk to the guests and get a chance to visit and talk with them. So, it's a dynamic, fun environment. There are a lot of opportunities. And once it gets in your blood, you just can't shake it.
It's definitely tough to get out of that. And another conversation I was having it's a good reminder is so many of our best memories, if you look back, surrounded some form of food. and oftentimes that's at a restaurant. And so
Absolutely.
there's celebrations, there's celebrations of life, and when somebody passes away, or celebrations for somebody graduating or getting married. A lot of times those happen in and around the restaurant. And so a lot of those things end up being really impactful for a lot of people.
It's like a giant family table.
Absolutely. So talk to me a little bit about your current role. Talk to me a little bit about, for those that are unfamiliar with Sunny Street Cafe, you and I talked pre-show. I've gotten the privilege of eating in one of your restaurants, but for those that are unfamiliar, what is Sunny Street? Let's talk a little bit about what the brand is, and then we can talk a little bit about the history and kind of what you guys are doing.
Yeah, you bet. As I mentioned, we're in Columbus, Ohio. We've been around since 2006 and 2007. We're a breakfast and lunch concept. 6:30 to 2:30 primarily. We think of ourselves as kind of a chef-driven menu. It's fresh food, handmade, but yet very approachable. You'll come in and you'll see a lot of your favorites, but our chef likes to change it up a little bit, give it a little twist, make it something a little bit different than maybe what you can do out of your own pantry. We're very much community centric. We tend to operate, in our communities ourselves, and our owner operators and franchisees tend to be, very invested in their communities. So we're very much a local shop. We have ties to the surrounding area. So we enjoy being of the environment, of the the kind of the customer centric type role. We don't do we don't do a lot of TV promotions. We're not on the radio a lot. So we make our customers and our friends one person at a time, and tons of repeat business, and we just really enjoy that about our concept specifically.
I love that, because again, one of the other things that I often think about is the restaurants are part of the fabric of the community. And so where are you guys geographically, Scott? How big are you guys? What kind of you guys' corporate headquarters, and where you're sitting is in Ohio, but talk to me a little bit about kind of the breadth of how big is the brand. Sure. And where are they at, for those that are less familiar?
So we've got 22 restaurants open and operating now, 23rd under construction. We've got 8 restaurants in the Columbus metro area. 1 restaurant a little bit further north outside of Cleveland here in Ohio. We've got 4 restaurants in Metro St. Louis. We've got 7 restaurants in your neighborhood, the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We've got an outpost in Carbondale, Illinois, as well as Huntsville, Alabama.
That's awesome. So there's been a lot of competition. You and I talked about it again, the better breakfast concepts. There's been quite a bit, both in, you guys have been around for some years. And why do you think that's resonating with audiences? Because it's not just your brand. There's others that are out there that are doing the better breakfast that's got a twist on kind of just pancakes and eggs and bacon. And I love that about the creativity. But why do you think that's resonating so much with audiences out there and consumers?
Yeah, a couple things. I think first and foremost, there's a lifestyle associated with the concept. With our hours of operation and the type of business that we have, it's a really kind of a fairly gentle way of being in the restaurant business. Mm-hmm. Because you can still, have a very successful business and, be home in time to pick up the kids from school. Yeah. To have a family dinner together, and to still enjoy, that portion of your work-life balance. So I think that's kind of what drives it, particularly, if you're an owner operator, or if you have, 1 or 2 stores. If you're a giant company and you're opening these, then that lifestyle component may not necessarily be as important. But if you're an investor and an entrepreneur, you look at that and say, I want to do this. I want to build something for my family, but I still want to be a part of my family's life while I'm doing it. So, even that having been said, the restaurant business is still challenging. We're closed 2 days a year. Mm-hmm. On all the holidays and fun days that you'd like to have off. Those are your busy days. So you're in your restaurant doing your thing. But nonetheless, it still gives you that opportunity to grow your business and enjoy your family. So that's kind of 1. 2, for the most part, at least for us in our concept, I always take this with a grain of salt. It's still relatively affordable to be in business with us. And I say that because it's a lot of money. It's always a lot of money when it's your money, and I get it. But when you look at the estimated total initial investment for a concept like ours, versus, fast food or full service diner type operation, we're probably, about half of what the investment would be. So Yeah, it's a little bit more attainable, I think, for some of the folks that want to do this. So I would say, those are kind of maybe the two biggest reasons off the top of my head that I can think of.
Yeah, I appreciate that that explanation, and I think it's I guess to go direct at it, you talk about the 22 units and the 23rd that's being built. Are they all owned by the group that you get to run in Ohio, or talk to me a little bit about what the ownership
Yeah,
style looks like, and what does it look like to be part of the family, for lack of a better term?
gotcha. So we're, we own and operate 10 of the 22. So the other 12 are franchisees. So we've got a fair amount of skin in the game. We sort of like that, 50-50 balance. So we enjoy the successes that our franchisees enjoy, and we also face the same challenges that they face. So, we're operators as well as franchisors.
Perfect. Perfect. So I'm going to pivot a little bit to the food. What is the experience like when I come into a Sunny Street again? You talk about your chef being creative and he comes up with some fun stuff. So for those that haven't experienced the brand, talk us through the experience. Is it like any other breakfast and lunch place, or and again, I know because I've been, but
Sure.
try and paint the picture for our audience out there that are less familiar and haven't had the privilege of checking things out.
Yeah, we like you, first and foremost to be comfortable. We like to greet you when you come in. We have we place a strong emphasis on creating, that direct connection between the guest and the service staff. So, we like to bring you in. We like to chat with you a little bit. We like to get you seated comfortably. We like to make some suggestions. We do a fair number of, billboard specials and, local specials, some things that, might not be on the menu. Particularly seasonally, we make regular changes to the menu. So we like our staff to be educated and be able to engage with the guests to understand what type of experience that you're looking for. So we have, by far and away our biggest. We're still pancakes, bacon, eggs, hash browns, right? That's a huge portion of the business. But we also have, we have some heart healthy options for you. We have wraps, we have salads, we have some super decadent type opportunities for you. I mean, if you want to come in and have s'mores pancakes, my friend, we can help you out on that. So it really is different, unique. When I say that, I feel that our menu is approachable. Sometimes when you go into a restaurant, particularly a higher end restaurant, you get that menu and you look at it and you get a little bit embarrassed because you don't really know what some of that stuff is. You might not know how to approach it or how to pronounce it. We try not to be that way. We try to make something very recognizable, but when we have the opportunity to spice it up a little bit, we will. One of the hallmarks of our menu is we do hand cut fresh fruit, which has always been a big portion of the concept, a big part of the concept, and people really spark to that. So we've got a variety there that will, I think, appeal to certainly the kids and mom and dad. And recently we've introduced a limited alcoholic beverage program. So you got a little mimosa or Bloody Mary out there if that's what needs to scratch that Sunday morning itch for you.
I love it. I love it. And I know that one of our brands that I work with talks about the no veto rule. I happen to be a father of 4. And so if any of my kids don't want to go to some place, so the fact that you've got an approachable menu, I mean, if you've raised kids, that oftentimes when you're in that kid raising phase, that's the time when you need to make sure that that their menu is resonating with that audience.
Don't you know
it? So I'm going to get a little personal here. So what is your favorite go-to menu item for Sunny Street? And then what's your, I'm going to splurge today because I've eaten well all week menu item. Just because it'd be intriguing to hear what Scott gets to eat.
I can tell you that my s'mores pancakes is that's my treat item, because I'm very fortunate. I get to taste and test everything. Mm-hmm. And when the chef and the operations guys were playing around with that, I'm like, guys, we got to have this. I mean, you just got to have it. So it's one of those things. If you're in, like, you and your family, it'd be one of those opportunities where you would come in and you would order that and you would all be able to share it. I'm not sure that you can sit down and really just sort of knock out a plate of that, but you can certainly get around it. And then other than that, honestly, I'm a basic guy. I'm a bacon eggs guy. I'm pretty straightforward. I like crispy hash browns. I like to have a pancake on the side. It's a little bit of syrup and a little bit of butter. That's a nice treat. Although I do like some of the Tex-Mex option. We've opened some restaurants in Texas, and we got bit by that Tex-Mex bug. So we've got some kind of caliente items on there that appeal to you if you want something a little bit spicier and more unique.
I did recognize that on the menu when I got to eat at the store that was local. So, well, I appreciate you sharing a little bit of your own. And I have only gone in myself without my children, and I've got 3 teenagers at home, and so I'm wondering if I can challenge any of them to eat the s'mores pancakes by themselves, because
You got to do it. You got to do it.
I will certainly be checking that out over the next couple of weeks before school starts again. So, Scott, talk to me now. You alluded to it earlier. You guys are a franchise. I know that you guys are looking to grow. What does it look like as an owner operator? You were telling me a story pre-show, and I'd love for you to repeat it for our audience out there about what does it look like? What does it look like as somebody that might want to engage in ownership? We talked about the brand. We talked about what the experience might look like as a consumer. But now I'm in the market to go start a breakfast concept. You talked about the, being able to get home for picking up the kids from school or getting the soccer practice and
right.
and whatnot. What does the engagement look like, and how can our audience engage if they want to explore more about what Sunny Street is and how ownership for the local community might look?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing that I would suggest is they just hit the www.sunnystreetcafe.com. We understand that in today's world, kind of an immediacy of information is super important to have. So we've tried to make the website very informative and, hit, some of the highlights, the key questions that folks ask, so that they very quickly they can understand whether or not the opportunity is appropriate for them. If after that review, they feel comfortable and want to take the next step, then there's a mechanism built on the website. It's pretty simple. Give me a name, an email address, and we'll reach out and we'll find you. Generally, we set up an exploratory call. You have access to my calendar. So you get that, and you can find a time that works for you. And we do an introductory call. It's usually about 30 minutes. And really, that's very similar to what we're doing right now. We'll just chat. Because I won't say that we're not in the sales opportunity, but really what we're trying to do is we're trying to find out whether or not where we are and what we do is a good fit for the prospective franchisee with where they are and what they want. So one of my mentors many years ago told me something that I try to remember, every time I speak to somebody, in that if you're in a sales or development type role and you're talking more than listening, you're probably not doing a very good job. So I try to remember that when I engage with somebody and just understand, where they're at and what they'd like to do and what their aspirations are. Understand what their timeframes are, whether or not they're going to be hands-on in the business, whether or not they have any family members that they want to participate in, whether or not they have any geographical restrictions, whether or not maybe they've already got a space that they've looked at and said, gee, I think this would be a great spot for a restaurant. So by doing that, we can understand more specifically what information we need to provide to the prospective franchisee so that they can evaluate the opportunity. And that really is kind of my role fundamentally, is simply to facilitate the exchange of information between us and a prospective franchisee, and then ultimately between a prospective franchisee and then our existing franchisees, so that they can talk firsthand with folks that have lived it and can give them some pretty solid advice going forward.
That's a great approach, because I've dealt with lots of restaurateurs over the years that it's all about, let me just get the next franchisee and let me get them. Where do they sign on the dotted line? Let's grow the brand without respect to making sure that they're the right. As far as a ownership profile, as you're looking at audiences, again, I've been in the restaurant business for quite some time. I've seen brands that are like, oh, do you have the franchise fees to sign up? And it doesn't matter whether you've ever set foot in a restaurant. You can buy it. You can be an absentee owner. And then there's some that are really stringent, won't let you get beyond. Do you want people with multiple brands? Talk to me a little bit about what the right profile is for an ownership group.
Right. So, currently the majority of our owners have not had prior restaurant experience.
Interesting.
So
Love
yeah,
that.
right. So we now that's not all. I mean, we have a gentleman down in your neck of the woods who had some experience, but prior to that, on the majority, no. So we feel very strongly that by going through our training program, we can help you gain the necessary skills to be successful. So consequently, for Sunny Street Cafe, it's not a requirement that
That's great.
you have previous experience, nor is it per the contract, per the agreement, required that you be the owner operator hands-on. Although I will tell you, I will say, restaurants make lousy investments, unless you're willing to get in there and work it. These things don't run themselves.
Yes.
They're very dynamic. So, I certainly encourage, at least during the initial period of ownership, that a stakeholder be involved on the day-to-day operation. Now, that having been said, kind of the gold standard for, franchisors out there are, a well-heeled multi-brand operator that has an existing infrastructure in place that's looking for a non-competing brand to build out the geography. We all would love that.
I just say everybody wants that. Everybody wants them to have all of the experience. I mean, the challenge, though, that sometimes even in that, Scott, is that then they want to bring all of their ideas and tell you how to run your brand, and it's like, well, get out of here! You bought into my brand. I'm not buying into what you're doing, which always creates a challenge there.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times when you talk to those guys, they look at it, and one of the first things they want to do is say, well, listen, you're paying rent on this space, 24/7, and you're only open from 6:30 to 2:30. How about we do a dinner day part, and we can really drive those top line sales? So, I mean, I love great ideas, and I love being challenged, but clearly, sometimes there are fits for the concept that don't always work out. So that having been said, I feel very comfortable in making our opportunity available for single unit operators that don't have any previous experience. We, of course, would welcome multi-unit operators, and we do have a facility in our agreement that offers some incentives for a 3-store deal and going forward. And we do have an area representative type program, which is really sort of taking the business to a different level, where we have some shared revenue streams with the developer in an area, and they have some responsibility to open a number of restaurants in a specific period of time. So I won't say that we're one brand, one size that fits all, but we have a multitude of opportunities that are available from single to multi-unit.
I think that's great, and I love that you're open to those things. It's always funny because you and I have both been in the business for a while, and you've watched these guys. They want to do these things. It's like, stop it. We're not gonna become a different brand because you now are a franchisee.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I probably know the ideal, but what is the ideal profile? Is it 10,000 square feet? Is it 5,000 square feet? Is it 3,500 square feet? Is it in suburban? Is it in urban areas? Talk to me a little bit about what is it rural on a highway? Talk to me a little bit about what ideal profiles look like and where you're finding success.
You betcha. So what we'd like to see is between 3,000 and 3,400 square feet of leased space, with some opportunity for either outside seating or a proper patio. Typically, our preferred locations are in grocery store anchored neighborhood shopping centers, usually on a street that carries between 15 and 35,000 cars a day. We typically are more suburban than we are urban. We like to be in the communities that we service. Whenever possible, we like to be on the going to work side of the road. And in terms of disposable income and demographics, we generally skew a little bit higher on disposable income. Demographics, geographically, you need to have at least 25,000 people in a 2 or 3 mile radius to support one of the restaurants.
I have never heard the phrase on the going to work side of the road.
Yeah,
that's kind of interesting, but it makes a lot of sense, because if I'm driving to work and I need to get grab myself a bite to eat, and I've got to go up a lane and turn around, you lose probably 25% of your traffic, if not more.
Listen, I got to tell you, ingress and egress to your center is super important, because people are pressed for time, and sometimes making that hard left-hand turn will knock you out of the block. It'll be a disqualifier. So you've got to be super accessible. You've got to have a lot of ready parking You've got to be visible from the street. So, the nuance of, any site selection opportunity, as many of those boxes as you can check, the better you'll be. Because it's as they say, the one thing you can ever change about your restaurant is where you put it.
Where it's at. Yeah. Location, location, location. Everybody's heard it.
Indeed.
I'm going to ask one last question, or one kind of series of questions, Scott, related to off-prem.
Sure.
Obviously you guys had to pivot, with COVID and such. We're kind of on the backside of that, but everybody has a different strategy as it relates to off-prem. What is Sunny Street's, relation to off-prem, whether it's call-in orders, whether it's takeout orders? Breakfast is a day part that struggles at times in off-prem unless you're in quick serve. And so I'd love to just kind of know what's your guys' theory and how have you guys tackled any of that?
Well, I have to tell you, to your point, we went from a hustling, bustling breakfast and lunch restaurant to closed dining rooms. And, in our role, when you look around, that gets mighty scary. So, right, you got to figure out what you got to do, and you got to do it pretty quickly. So we embraced the off-premise model pretty broadly. To put it in perspective, prior to COVID, we were off-premise 2 or 3% of our business, right? It just wasn't a thing for us.
Yep.
Now sustainable, we're mid double digits.
That's great.
What we're doing. Yeah, I mean, it really created for us a day part that we didn't have before.
Yeah.
We also had a very robust catering program prior to COVID. And quite frankly, when we were wringing our hands during that time, we didn't know if that was ever going to come back, right? Because, catering was typically directed to groups, and groups didn't look like it was going to be a thing going forward.
Yeah, groups don't get together during COVID.
Yeah, there you go. But man, that came back. So it's kind of hard to say this, but there were certain blessings that we were afforded as a result of the opportunities that COVID required us to do that helped us grow our business in a way that we had unexpected prior to the COVID pandemic. So we just now we're in the midst of a remodel of our downtown restaurant, which is just down the block from Orange City in downtown Columbus, and we've got a dedicated pickup area, for folks to come in. It's just amazing to see how folks in general have gotten used to, the grab and go portion, pre-ordering, ordering online, ordering on the website, all of that. And, to your point, and the tech stack has become so much more important. So it really has, helped us in our business model significantly because the catering piece came back stronger than before. And then the off-premise piece and third party is just really a phenomenal part of the business now.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're not alone in that most people were in the single digits or low double digits, but they've now figured out how to do it because you had to, no different than you just said. And then once you figure it out, you're like, hey, this is an additional day part that I hadn't considered before, that if I staff for it and ensure that we're doing it well, people will continue to come back because they got used to it.
Yeah, we talked about, earlier about, some folks wanted to create that third dinner day part as part of our breakfast and lunch concept. And of course, we're not amenable to that. However, the off-premise and the catering piece is in fact that other day part that you can take advantage of. And if you're diligent, you can do well. There's some challenges, right? Because, nothing gets colder faster than eggs.
Uh-huh.
But, packaging, became a big part of the equation. Tailoring some aspects of the menu to food that travels better, particularly on the catering program, right? You take, it's not like you're catering your entire menu. You're looking for the opportunities within your menu that lend themselves particularly well, for being delivered off premise. And we did, and also, we did and still do, some ghost concept-y kind of things. We run some burrito concept of our restaurants down there in Texas, as a matter of fact, and you pick up a couple of shekels by doing that as well. So it's kind of fun.
I wish I would have known that. We probably would have talked a little bit about it. And I know we're getting closer to time here, Scott. So, I guess I want to have you double click real quick. And I know I said we're getting close to time, but I want you to talk about the evaluation process that you guys had for food that's traveling. Because I think it's probably one of the things that when we talk about guest experience that restaurateurs don't consider as often as they should, which is when you get to packaging is incredibly important. Guest communication is really important.
Sure.
Making sure that the products that you put in there do travel well or take them off the menu because you're not going to deliver on the guest experience. So talk to me about that process. You guys obviously had to do it really, really quickly with COVID, but as it's become 10% or more of your day, talk to me a little bit about what you guys think about and how you guys evaluate that and change.
Yeah, 100%. And to circle back on packaging, that was one of the first things that we need to do because, the day and age of just throwing a bunch of stuff in a styrofoam clamshell, that don't cut it. We learned pretty quickly by looking at the competitive set to look at folks that are out there that had those programs and were doing it well. And, you can cut down the learning curve pretty quickly if you're willing to say, you know what, these guys are doing it well. I want to do it like that. And then working with our broadliner to make sure that we can get that packaging available. And then you mentioned it earlier, you can't, it's crazy to think you're going to cater and deliver your entire menu. You have to help people not make mistakes by tailoring your menu. It's super hard to deliver Eggs Benedict. It's just, and we do it, we can, but there are 6 different packaging components that go along with that. And in addition to that, in some instances we provide reheating instructions, right? So that, people get back and know how to get hot. So there was an element of trial and error. There certainly was an element by learning what's out there already in the environment. We work closely with our broadliner to see what we can get in. And of course, at that time, with the restrictions in the supply chain, stuff got real expensive.
And really hard to get from time to time.
And really hard to get
packaging, but the brand that's doing 4 times more with that broadliner gets the first dibs on it.
You don't know it. So it was challenging and it was a lot of work. But man, I'll tell you what, if you're willing to put in the time and pay attention to it, the dividends that it pays are just incredible.
Yeah, and I love the some of the process you went through because I tell this to our customers often is go look at what your competitors are doing.
Yeah.
Go talk to your partners. You already have a business partnership, whether it be with US Foods or Cisco, and say, what is everybody else doing? Because those guys are in those restaurants every day watching them do it well, or watching them go, hey, we just bought 10,000 of these clamshells and they all suck. Get me new ones in here. And, and don't make that same mistake. Am I right?
Absolutely. You got to really as you said, you got to take advantage of the resources that are already in place to help you. And if you can do that, you'll shorten that learning curve, and it'll cost you a lot. Mistakes in the restaurant business are super expensive. So you really want to try to kind of minimize those as best you can.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Scott, I know we've taken this conversation all over the place, and to our audience, guys, we know that you guys have got choices, but why don't you give us one last time? How do they learn more about Sunny Street? How do they get involved? How do they discover and have a conversation with you beyond just listening to you and I sit here and chat for 30 minutes or so?
You bet. It's www.sunnystreetcafe.com. It's quick and easy, and I'll make it convenient for you as well.
Awesome. Scott, thank you so much for educating us on kind of the things that you guys did. To our audience, guys, like I said, you guys have got lots of choices, so we appreciate you guys spending time each and every week when we post one of these podcasts. If you haven't already subscribed, whether it's to the podcast on the audio or to our YouTube channel, please go do that. And Scott, thank you and have a fantastic day.
Jeremy, appreciate the opportunity. You have a good day as well.